Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's such a pleasure to be back here with all of you at this amazing conference. Thank you, Yohnny, for trusting us again as your knowledge partner. So Tuesday, I was already here, and we explored the impact of the COVID-19 on the development of African cities and mobility services. So today, well, let's look a bit further into the future. With our 4 panelists, and for the next 30 minutes or so, we'll explore the initiatives that are making African cities smarter, enabling better movement of people and goods. At the end of the session, feel free to ask questions. Once again, I feel terribly lucky to share the virtual stage with great professionals. Each panelist has a different expertise and experience while looking at the same industry. So we will then cover quite a holistic spectrum of the mobility landscape. So without further delay, let me introduce you to our first speakers, and ladies first, Ms. Haya Douidri. So Haya is an urbanist and mobility sustainability expert and thought leader in the tech and innovation policies. So she's currently Vice President EMEA for the micromobility company Superpedestrian. And she's responsible for Superpedestrian's expansion across EMEA. Believe me or not, but Haya speaks 8 languages. So welcome, hola, bonjour Haya.
Bonjour, hola. Thank you so much, Frederic, for such a nice introduction. I appreciate it. And it's a pleasure for me to join. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today.
Great. We're glad to have you today. Well, I'm sure you're quite familiar now with our second panelist, Mr. Bruno Gutierrez, but I'm still going to introduce him for the ones who just joined us. So Bruno is from Alstom and is the Director of Mobility Orchestration and Collaborative Innovation. Bruno founded the Airbus Base Lab in 2015, and this is the first aerospace accelerator where startups and entrepreneurs were fostering innovation. He's also a rugby fan and a former player. Welcome, Bruno.
Thanks so much. It's a real pleasure to be part of this conference.
Amazing. Thanks a lot. Last, but definitely not least speaker is Mr. Yohnny Raich. So as data product owner at Where Is My Transport, Yohnny oversees the team responsible for mapping the world's emerging market cities. He has led on-site public transport and data collection projects in South Africa, Ethiopia, Cameroon, and Bangladesh. Welcome, Yohnny.
Thank you, Frederic, and thank you, Smarter Mobility Africa, for having me speak with these amazing panelists.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Well, it's a great pleasure to have all of you here today. Before we start, I'd like to share some recommendations. Well, first of all, let's make this session insightful and fun for everybody. So feel free to jump into the debate when you want to add something, but also especially if you disagree. I truly believe that, well, when we bring some different perspectives, it's always valuable. Finally, let's make sure that everyone has a fair amount of speaking time. So apologies in advance, but I have a watch just in front of me. So I'll playing a sometime unpopular role, but I'll be the timekeeper for this discussion, if this is okay for you. All right? Okay, let's get started.
Perfect.
So we have here in the panel experts able to cover from the ground to the air mobility services. So mobility has a large portfolio of solutions, right? And how can this portfolio address sustainability concerns in urban environment? How can the mobility services you are working on can help to develop a more sustainable urban area? I'd like to start with Haya.
Great, thank you so much, Frederic. Yeah, so it's a great question. I mean, I think that like today we're still living in a very car-centric world. In Europe, transport is the largest source of greenhouse emissions. We know that climate change is not going anywhere, and still transport is contributing, at least in Europe, to more than 25% of those emissions. I'm proud to say that I don't have a car. I refuse to buy a car because then I cannot say that in panels like this. So I will only consider one day buying an electric cars, but I haven't owned a car for the past I think eight years actually, and part of that is because I'm lucky to live in the Netherlands, where it's a very bike-focused society where I can get anywhere with my bike, and if I need to get a little bit further, and we bike on every day, rainy, cold, everything. I was required to bike in extreme weather conditions in order to become officially Dutch. So I can use the bike everywhere, and we have really good public transport where if I need to go to another city, I can use the train. But it's not everywhere that you have that possibility to actually not own a car. So I feel very grateful to not have to own a car. So what we're trying to do in Superpedestrian, which is the company where I'm leading their Europe, Middle East, and Africa, although we still don't have African presence, but it's officially in the title, so hopefully one day. What we're trying to do is really get people out of their cars in a safe and sustainable way. We're trying to offer sustainable mobility, what we call first and last mile, but I think that the potential is way more than just first and last mile. Get people out of the car in a safe way, reduce the number of hours that you're spending in traffic, and basically reclaiming our road back. Because I think one of the biggest issues today that most of our road and the streets are really located to roads and parking, and we have that unprecedented opportunity to transport how people move. And why I say scooters is one of the solutions what we offer, why I think that scooters are really unprecedented, is there has never been a transport mode that got so popular over a very, very fast period of time. I mean, people love it. 2 years ago, scooters started being introduced, and imagine today they're in 1,000 cities across the world. They're in 70 countries in over 2 years. The utilization that we see for scooters is far exceeding any ride hailing. It's far exceeding bikes. It's actually incredible. The growth has exceeded ride hailing, which was considered very revolutionary as well. So the potential is huge. And the journeys that we have in cities, most of those journeys, we call them last miles, but most of the journeys are few miles. So most of the journeys are actually doable with scooters and bikes. And so this is what we get really excited about, is really getting people out of the cars, getting them into scooters, into bikes. At Superpedestrian, we do shared e-scooter services across the US and Europe. And we also have our Copenhagen wheel, which turns any bike magically into an electric bike. It's really cool. So that's a bit more about us.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I read somewhere that in the Netherlands, the fact that people cycle a lot, use a lot of scooters, walk a lot, it helps to increase the GDP, the yearly GDP by plus 3%, which is quite a lot and quite relevant in a crisis period. Before we move on, I'd just like to welcome Mr. Victor Radebe, who's just joined us. And just to make it short, Victor is a urban air mobility advocate and expert. So he will bring a bit of expertise about what will happen in the air in our cities. So back to the question, Victor, just to get you up to speed. We were just discussing about how can the mobility services can help to build a more sustainable world. How can urban air mobility can help?
Well, urban air mobility, thank you very much for having me on this show. Sorry for being late, and great show indeed. Urban air mobility is a new creation. It's moving us from the ground to the air, but don't promise it to be a panacea to some of the problems that we experience on the ground, like congestion, crashes, and emissions and all of that. However, it promises to move the needle in specific aspects, whether it's emergency services, whether it's moving, airlifting people in a crash scene, and drone deliveries. You've seen them being piloted in Rwanda and in some of the areas. But this is a new feature. But don't look at it from a mass mobility point of view, but as kind of niche. If you want to get blood samples or medical samples from one point to the other as quick as possible, probably that is a solution. But other than that, mass mobility, we're still okay on the ground.
All right. Feet on the ground. Okay, I can understand that. Bruno, what is your perspective as a mobility orchestrator expert?
I'm sorry, the communication is bad and it's cut it, so I cannot hear your question. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just asking you how the mobility orchestration can help to build more sustainable urban environments.
I mean that, as I was saying, now the mobility offer is really diverse, and luckily, I mean, we have plenty, and we have seen that Haya explained that very well as well. That mobility and bikes and e-scooters come to complete the mobility offer. The public transport mobility offer. But what we have to take care about is not to pile mobility offer one after another, but to orchestrate and to synchronize that in order to make it globally efficient. Once again, that's the first thing. Because that's, if we want to push people to move from individual transport and car transport, mainly private car, up to green and sustainable transport, whatever it is. I mean, tram, bus, electrical buses, hydrogen is coming very strongly as well. So if we want people to move from that kind of transport, which is very polluting and increasing the congestion of town and cities, if we want people to move from that point to the other, we need to restore trust in public transport mobility first, and what we are seeing with COVID is the perfect illustration of that. So we have to restore trust first. We have to give the opportunity to authorities to incentivize this kind of transport, and to do so, they have to they need to understand how the transport demand is evolving within the city. So data is allowing us to do that and to give them the right information, to give to the authority the right information in order to set up the right offer. So I think that the match between the offer and the demand and the offer is key, and in real time, and being able to provide as well an individual information to the passengers, to the customer, to the citizen. That's something which is key.
I think, Bruno, that you touch a very important point regarding trust, especially during a pandemic. Data can help to build trust. Am I right, Yohnny? And how can data be part of the solution to build a more sustainable world?
Yes, so Frederic, as you rightly mentioned, especially in our opinion, data and information is key, especially understanding how people are moving in the majority of these African cities. So at Tourism Transport, we specialize in collecting public transportation information on the way that up to 80% of the population in many African cities are moving via informal public transportation, whether that's a minibus, taxi in South Africa, Danfo in Lagos, Matatu in Kenya. These systems are moving the majority of the populace to access not only jobs, but healthcare, visiting their families, and supporting economic activity. Unfortunately, they are often usually the most polluting vehicles. They are the oldest, they are the least roadworthy. And so the first step in understanding if we're to upgrade these vehicles, if we're to connect them to first and last mile connectivity to larger, formal, hopefully more sustainable public transportation systems, is understanding where those routes go. Governments currently have no view on the majority of these services, how people are moving, not only how people are moving with them, but where these go, how much they cost when they operate. And if we're looking to build out any type of electrical infrastructure charging network for these vehicles to upgrade them to be one day more sustainable, it's key to have data on where they are going and how people are moving with them.
Interesting. I just want to go back to one point that Bruno mentioned, COVID-19. Well, we all experience a change in the way that we work. Well, I'm here at my place, and I guess that a lot of you are also at your place. So how is the work from home impact the benefits of your mobility services? And perhaps, Bruno, you can start. Bruno, can you hear me? All right. So I was just saying that, well, you mentioned COVID-19 as an important factor. And well, now we work a lot from home, and especially in France now with the new lockdown. So how, this work from home impact Oh, Bruno has just disconnected. Haya, but perhaps you want to...
Yeah, I'm back. Okay, it's about COVID-19 and the impact on transport and homework, isn't it?
More specifically about the work from home.
More specifically on... I missed
work
you.
from home. The work from home.
Oh yeah, okay.
I'm
okay,
here.
Okay. Well, the impact has been huge, obviously, because in most of the town, the usage of public transport dropped to 80%, something like that. So I mean, all the cities and all the operators has been able to measure this due to the lack of confidence, but as well due to homework. So it's probably something that we're gonna see in a long trend, obviously, and to that, I think that even more data sharing, information sharing will be even more important. Giving the right information of people who are at home, explaining them that we are going out of the natural peak hours, between 7:30 and 9, the famous peak hour transport in all the cities, and probably homework will help to display the transport need and the transport demand all along the day, with the ability to delay your home departure, with the ability to be back sooner home. So I think that thanks to that, we're going to have more fluidity in the demand from home to work. That's something that we will experience probably. This is something a little bit new at this level, at least, that we are facing. Let's see. But I think that this will give more fluidity in transport and more fluidity in demand.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Bruno. I just want to make sure. Does anyone want to add anything on that matter?
Yeah. I mean, I think that like COVID, one of the impacts of COVID, which are positive, is that impact on the environment. I mean, scientists have said that air quality has actually improved. I think COVID has done more than all states and private companies and a lot together. It has just forced us to take action right away, stay home, not use our cars, and it's just more environmentally friendly. I mean, air travel has dropped. I know it's not great for airplane companies, but it has a positive impact on the environment, to be very sincere. So, it's been great. I mean, it's been great from an environmental perspective. It also has showed us that we are not very capable of solving such global problems and collaborating. So when, climate change, we think we can wait until last minute. Actually, we're not going to do it very well, So I think it has that positive impact, show us that this is, in the times of crisis and such a global pandemic and a global crisis, when climate change is going to hit harder, it's going to be very challenging for us. For micromobility specifically, it has... I think a lot of cities across Europe has taken incredible actions to have segregated bike lanes implemented overnight in cities and allow for more bikes, more e-scooters, and kind of implement those infrastructure improvements over a very short period of time, which has been really, really great. And I think that we've seen the use case change a bit from, the tourists are at home, they're not, traveling anymore. We've seen more local usage. We've been seeing more longer trips. So instead of using it as a last mile to connect to public transport, unfortunately, public transport can, the capacity, it has reduced to 30%. You cannot support because of the social distancing. So you've seen people actually using scooters and using bikes for full trips. And it has been filling that gap for those who don't have a car and who don't want to use public transport. So there has been new use cases, I think, and that's been very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. New use cases, yeah, that's true. And new behaviors as well. The human factor is really important in this crisis. Thank you very much for sharing. Does anyone want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd just like to add one more point, Victor. Oh, sorry, apologies. So we've been maintaining some of the informal public transportation data actually in the Gauteng province right now. And what we've seen, Victor, I know you're also familiar with this, is that the fares for most of these vehicles have actually gone up to 20%. So for vehicles that are still, and routes that are still operating, albeit that quite a few routes are no longer operating because these operators, they don't receive subsidies from the state. And so if there's less traffic, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, the South African government was reducing the capacity of these vehicles, requiring only 75% capacity. So we've seen a lot of routes go away, and we've seen fare increases on a lot of routes. And what that means is for people who are working and who have to take informal public transportation, whether that's again to a larger BRT style system or metro or train, or just even arrive at their job or their workplace, it's costing them more money and it's probably taking them longer to get there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Yohnny. Thank you very much. So we've been talking a lot about what's happening at a global scale, but now I'd like to focus a bit more on the region that interests us today, Africa. So Victor, I have a question for you. How the African continent distinguishes itself from other regions in terms of smart mobility and intelligent cities?
Look, the opportunities in Africa, as you've seen, for instance, in new use cases like drone deliveries, just COVID-19, for instance, has catapulted urban air mobility, or what they call advanced air mobility. I mean, a company like Amazon, which looks like it was made for COVID, the company grew by over $500 billion, in the past 8 months. It has come into this industry through drone deliveries. We've seen Walmart. And where Africa can play a role is in testing of these use cases. We've seen a Silicon Valley-based company called Zipline, which basically built its operation out of Rwanda. Now they're going back to the US because US and Europe are crowded airspaces, and Africa has an opportunity to do all of these tests. But we're not seeing just for tests, but we're also looking from development to deployment of this technology, because our road infrastructure is a big problem, and the air provides us with that opportunity for us to grow.
Okay. Do you think that African cities are a good test ground for future mobility services?
Yes, of course. I mean, pre-COVID, traffic congestion at peak hour has becoming a problem. And in the continent, the investment into the infrastructure has been problematic. As much as you've seen in the telecom space, physical infrastructure, the absence of that has made smart mobile telephone industry to grow at a much rapid rate. We're going to see that as far as urban air mobility and aviation, because you can move from point to point. In the air, it's much easier to build a highway than on the ground, and it's even much cheaper to do so.
Okay, very interesting. Indeed, it can be a very interesting test ground. And African cities have also a very unique factor is the urbanization rates. And actually one of the main drivers pushing smart cities to be a reality is the growing urbanization. Just an example for the next decades, in Lagos, there will be over 650,000 new residents every year for the next 3 decades. So my question, and I'd like to start with Haya. How do you think smart mobility services will play a role to absorb this continuous inflow of people?
Yeah, it's a great question, and maybe focusing a little bit on Africa. I've lived and traveled around Africa, and a lot of I just love Africa in general. I think it's some of the most dynamic, vibrant cities. For me, I really love it. So I mean, the pollution that you see, but also the traffic that you see. I don't think I've experienced as worse traffic as Nairobi or as Cairo in Egypt, or as Lagos. I've been stuck in traffic for hours. It's incredible. So I think that we have that opportunity to improve road infrastructure, and in the same time to create those segregated bike lanes. It's not going to be, of course, an easy thing to do, but we've seen in Europe that it can be done, and that there are cities that are exemplary in how fast they've implemented bike lanes. In Sevilla, for example, it's just incredible if you read about their journey and how they've done that. So I think that micromobility could actually be great for Africa. It is the future of transport. That's how I see it, at least for a big portion of those trips. It's not, of course, going to fully replace car trips, but it can take a lot of the short journeys within cities and help. I think there are some obstacles that we would need to figure out how to overcome. And in my opinion, the only way to overcome them is really through private-public partnerships and open dialogue, and like, putting it on the table. Like there's the infrastructure challenge, which you really need to kind of have some of the roads be ready. But there's also the affordability challenge. Even in some of the European cities, we still see that micromobility is not really affordable to everyone. And it's something that, for us is really top of mind, is the topic of equity. How do you make sure it's equitable, and how do you make sure it's accessible for everyone? So I think, of course, electric cars are great, but it's difficult to implement charging stations, even in here. So for Africa, it will be more, it will be like a dream for a lot of people to buy those vehicles. And so I think that it's really about like an open conversation. I do think that it can provide a great alternative. And I don't remember the name of the speaker that was before the panel that was talking about bike sharing in Africa. I got very excited. I thought that's great. So I think it can provide a really nice alternative option. And a lot of people are still don't have their private cars, so maybe it's a little bit easier also. I think there's also a little bit of a shift in image that is required, because from my experience, at least the bike is seen as like something that is there's a certain prestige that is associated with having a car, and that the bike is not as nice. So we need to bring that Dutch culture of like, everyone, even our prime minister goes on the bike, and it's just normal. It's actually a great way to move around. You should be proud if you don't have a car. So I think that's the shift that is also like psychologically kind of needed.
So social status, communication, PPP, affordability. Bruno, how can mobility orchestration can help in that objective to absorb the inflow of new people, of new residents? Bruno,
I don't know if you were talking to me, but I'm able to catch one word among 10, which is a little bit difficult to rebuild the sentence.
How can mobility orchestration can help with smart cities, the urbanization rates?
Okay, I'm not so sure that I've understood the question, but let me speak about if we want to transport mass people, we need to work on the infrastructure, and I'm fully in line with what has been said by Haya, the road, but as well the infrastructure for public transport need to be increased. But what is great with African City is that you do not have to work with legacy most of the time. So you can go further and immediately step into green transport. If there is one free energy in Africa, is the sun. So I mean, we need to set it up to increase the usage of electricity for public transport, for bike, for e-scooters, to make it affordable. That's the big challenge. I fully agree with that. It's great to have e-cars within a city, but actually they are not affordable. They are really expensive. So that's probably not the solution. So I mean, it's working first on the infrastructure. If we want to move a mass of people, we absolutely need to work on the infrastructure and on the greener side by pushing electricity mobility, or what is electrical in mobility. Thanks to the sun, I mean, this is a huge advantage. Please use it, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So legacy, this is a very good point. Communication, PPP, social status from Haya. Victor or Yohnny, do you want to add anything about this?
No, you spoke about the issue of urbanization. This is the biggest driver of change in Africa, urbanization and climate change. And it has a huge impact on transport. And moving to matters on the ground, I mean, there's a study done by PwC in South Africa that says that we spend an equivalent of 9 days in the traffic. I would like to appeal to people like Alstom, to you, Bruno, that The changing environment now is that work is not a place where we go. We take work wherever we go, sometimes into the wrong places like the bedroom. However, can mass mobility providers like Alstom get us to work on our way to work? If you can change the environment within a train or a taxi or whatever, so that I can be able to stay connected. Because if I get stuck in the traffic, hey, why not do work whilst on my way to work, in inverted commas? Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Victor. Well, let's make sure to write this down to make sure that Bruno got the question and heard your call to action. So before we open the floor to questions from the audience, I'd like to discuss a very important topic actually for me, which is road safety. Well, more people in cities will certainly increase, the concern about road safety. And Africa, unfortunately, is one of the regions in the world with the highest level of road casualty. So how can a smart city make a difference in that particular issue? Yohnny, can data make the difference?
Yeah, so road safety is a really large challenge, especially in a lot of African cities. There's quite a few really great organizations that are working on road safety. One really cool project that we were not involved in, but that again used the idea of understanding public transportation data, was the World Bank cooperated with Maturu. They're a Twitter feed based out of Nairobi where people basically report where different accidents are. That helps people who are also navigating the city. As I was saying, Nairobi is one of, I think it's the top 5 most congested city in the world. They actually overlaid the combination of public transportation data, both for basically the Matatu system, in combination with these accident reports, and then use different algorithms to actually identify the most likely areas for pedestrian casualties. And then the government of Nairobi was able to prioritize investment into pedestrian safety into those areas. So I think when we talk about smart cities, the solution, it doesn't need to be the most cutting edge, doesn't need to be the most edge of technology, especially in a lot of African cities. It's really going back to basics, using good quality data to target interventions that are most needed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. Data, really important. Haya?
Yeah, segregated bike lanes. My answer to road safety is segregated bike lanes when it comes to micromobility, of course, because that's the answer for Europe, that's the answer for Africa. We need to start thinking about designing cities not just for cars, but actually for micromobility. And I think the potential of micromobility is we're still seeing the beginning, really the beginning. So it's bikes, it's scooters, it's going to be seated scooters, it's going to be those small, small vehicles that are coming on the road. We see a lot of innovation actually in the micromobility. So when I imagine the cities of the future, I really imagine that segregated lane for slower vehicles. There is no need to have a 3-ton vehicle for one person that uses it, once a week. That just doesn't make sense anymore. So I think that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is really coexisting. And when I say coexisting, is really learning and rider education, and for people to respect that they're not the only one on the road. I mean, I feel extremely safe on a bike in the Netherlands because, everyone expects people to be on a bike. And I've ridden bikes in cities around the world where people looked at me very weirdly, and car drivers were very angry because I'm on my bike, and they peeped at me and they looked at me and they wanted me out, basically. Which was really uncomfortable for me, being on my bikes and being treated like that. So it's about respect, that everyone can choose how they want to commute, and we all have a responsibility when we're on the road, regardless what method of travel we chose, to actually respect others and coexist, co-inhabit. And this is a role for private companies to educate their users. It's a role for governments, and it's a role for individuals. So I think segregated bike lanes and coexistence.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad that you feel safe in the Netherlands on your bike. I'm afraid I'm not sharing this feeling here in London, but that's another discussion. Victor.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that I'm biking in Paris, and I think it's a different culture, honestly.
Different infrastructure as well, I would say. But I guess your mayor is working quite hard to make it happen. Which I think, in my opinion, it goes towards the right direction. Victor, urban air mobility and security, well, sometimes it's a bit difficult to be associated. What can you tell us about how can urban air mobility can improve urban safety for transport?
Look, urban air mobility, it's still obviously at its nascent stage because when people think of a drone, it conjures up a number of images. It's either is it a toy, is it a tool, or is it a weapon? And any one of those. But if you look at it as a tool, it's still by and large an IoT device. We are only just starting with urban air mobility. Companies like Airbus and Boeing, they're getting into this space, like Bell and Amazon, which is quite interesting because aviation is still the safest mode of travel. Okay, and in South Africa, not less than 23 people die in the roads on average, because of road crashes. We no longer call them accidents; we call them crashes. But aviation is the safest mode of travel, and we believe that if we can probably get that into the road infrastructure, because every crash that happened, of every aircraft crash that happens, you'll know about it all over the world. You saw about the 737 MAX, but road crash fatalities are becoming more like how should I call them, natural causes. And I think it's like what Haya said, it's just the respect for the rules of the road. But just from my personal experience, I believe insurance telematics is something that the industry should look into. I, for one, there's a company in South Africa called Discovery Insure. I used to drive like everybody else. However, I'm glad to say that today I never get a speeding fine. I never get any fines. I drive safely, no harsh acceleration, no harsh braking, within the speed limit, because there is something in it for me. There's an incentive that I get, and it has changed completely my driving behavior than what it was 5 years ago. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. I guess another way that is a very good way to not get fined is like, to not own a car at all and to take public transports. That's also a good way to make some savings. I think it is time to move on to the Q&A. Something tells me that we have very interesting questions. So there is one here from Jean-Claude for Bruno. In the context of Africa, how do you see organizing data so we can share it? Passenger information relies on sources of data which will not be available in African cities. Bruno?
Well, I think that's, well, maybe I can, it's easy for me now to understand. So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I think that's when we were speaking about sharing data, we are not speaking about sharing only transport data, and I was speaking about telecom data, and we know that African countries are well equipped in telephone, in smartphones. So you've got easily access to telecom data, which give you a good overview of what's happening within the city in terms of crowd management, in terms of movement, in terms of movement demand and transport and mobility demand. Then you've got the new mobility. It's easy to collect the data and to aggregate all this data within the same platform. So, and then you display it through an app, easy. And I mean, collecting data as soon as you've got the right contract with the operator to make it available, obviously. But collecting data and being able to aggregate them and to share it to the citizen is, for me, it's not a major issue, honestly. What is the major issue is to be able to understand what's happening and being able to predict and to anticipate the future saturation or traffic congestion within the city. So that's where the challenge is, much more than the collection and the display.
Okay. Thanks very much, Bruno. Willem, Should smart cities not lessen vehicles on road use by including overhead solutions? Who wants to take this one?
Yeah, I can take a swap at it. I think once the ecosystem is right, drone deliveries promises to lessen some of the movements on the ground. But we've got to be clear there where we're talking about high value, light deliveries. Yes, they can still deliver your pizza, but I want to look at things that are far more important, like your chronic medication for people who are immobile. Like, for instance, we've seen deliveries of COVID tests. So we should look at the drone deliveries more in a humanitarian, medical, drones for good kind of way. I know we would like to see a pizza coming to our backyard, but it makes sense from the context of Africa to look more in that space so that people get to accept drones, because right now they still don't accept drones. Even in Europe, a study that was done recently by Drone Insights, it's saying that in the European Union, people are still not fully accepting drones hovering in their backyard. So let's start off with drones for good in medical, in more essential stuff, and then we'll get back to the kind of lifestyle stuff like ordering your deliveries. Yes, we're going to get there, but I don't think we should start there.
Yeah, if I may add, I mean, I feel like we've overcrowded our cities with cars and roads, and we don't have like very limited public space, and now we want to crowd the air. Like, come on. I think it's ridiculous, to be honest. That's my personal view on this. I think we need to get more efficient vehicles, smaller vehicles, more appropriate for the type of the trip. We want to have trains that are incredible, that connect cities, like what we have here, and have like appropriate vehicles for trip type. But I don't want a drone delivering pizza to my house for medical use. Yes, maybe definitely if it makes sense for a very specific use case, I would say yes. But the thought of crowding the airspace and creating more emissions, that for me it's like no, I would say no.
Yeah, probably there's no one size fits all, and there are some particular use cases where urban air mobility can make sense to cross rivers, for example, or across mountains and so on, and many other applications that I'm sure Victor can think of. Thank you, Victor, by the way. I think I'm gonna get a pizza for lunchtime, so thank you very much for the suggestion. I think we still have time for one last question. Oh yeah, well, there he is. Thoughts on tracking and measurement tools and efforts in cities for private traffic flow, cycling trips, pollutions? Hard to improve if it's you can't accurately measure it. Probably Yohnny?
Yeah, so we don't specialize exactly in measuring private traffic flows and cycling, but I mean, what I can say from our experience is that working in cooperation with government, leveraging new private technologies from startups or other companies to help with this type of collection is the fastest way for governments to get this data. And I think, Haya, you made some great points around. It's hard to build these, these arguments have a lot of weight just from a moral perspective. It is the right thing to do. Numbers really help complement that to bring actionable insights. And I think that's really where we're going to drive a lot of change. It's a combination of the moral argument of, climate change is an emergency. We need to get people out of private cars, moving on to more sustainable modes of public transportation, complemented with data to prove and to back up what the current situation looks like. Also to be able to measure the effect of those changes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there is possibilities to measure that more than private, in the shared space. So I would say small initiatives that companies can do and work with cities on to get data can be very impactful. I mean, I think of one project that I'm trying to look at, which basically installing those pollution measures on scooters in some cities to show the improvement in air quality when people are using more scooters or bikes, stuff like that, where we could, also of course we cannot there's a huge debate, of course, on privacy and what we can share, what cannot share. But I think there is a lot of data that we can gather through even like optional, surveys around just in general movements and tracking and how people are using it. There is a huge debate on like, are scooters replacing cars? Are they not? And I'm always very interested in seeing the data of like when you see that, people 10, 20, 30, 40% are getting out of the cars to use a bike or a scooter. It's always very, very interesting. So I think it doesn't have to be a full effort. Even like those small pilots that could get us some insightful data can be very interesting.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Haya. Any last thoughts on this question?
I can get you a drone to measure.
No, I fully agree with all what has been said. I mean, we've got plenty of options to collect this kind of data, and the privacy is no more a big deal as soon as you are not tracking individual people, but you are tracking bunch of people, and what you are looking for is big trends and not tracking people for people. Doesn't make any sense. So I think that everything is available to have a good idea of what's happening in terms of crowd movement within a city, and even pollution generation as well.
Okay.
No need for additional sensors. That's what I'm saying. We've got all the sensors already displayed.
We just have to make it happen. Well, let's end on this note. Thank you all very much for your time, for your insights. I think it's time for a round of digital applause. So congratulations. And over to you, Sarah.
It's actually quite interesting that you guys mentioned drones. There's actually a music festival in South Africa that started distributing beers by drones, just saying.
Pizzas, beers, oh my goodness. We're making something very interesting here.
Well, now you don't have to leave the concert to go and get a beer.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I'm going to be pro drone in this case.
Well, thank you very much, lady and gents, for your time. We really do appreciate the great insights that you guys brought to the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.